Let me start with a surprising fact. After the age of 30, you lose up to 5% of your muscle mass every decade, even if your weight stays the same. By the time you're 60, you could be significantly weaker, slower, and more prone to injury, not because you weren't active, but because a specific cellular signal faded quietly in the background. And that signal is directly influenced by a simple micronutrient you might be overlooking: vitamin D. Yes, the sunshine vitamin, but here's the science most people don't know. According to a 2023 meta-analysis in the Journal of Cachexia, Sarcopenia, and Muscle, supplementing with vitamin D can begin reversing muscle loss in as little as 14 days, especially in deficient individuals. The mechanism? It goes far beyond bone health and deep into muscle fiber signaling, mitochondrial performance, and inflammation control. This isn't just about aesthetics or physical strength. Muscle mass is one of the most powerful predictors of how well you age, cognitively, emotionally, and metabolically. It affects your blood sugar regulation, your ability to recover from stress, your posture, and even your motivation. Because skeletal muscle communicates with your brain through molecules called myokines, in other words, how strong your body is changes how strong your mind feels. And vitamin D is one of the most direct, science-backed levers we have to support that connection. In this video, we're going to break down the research behind this vitamin-muscle link, including the biochemical pathways vitamin D influences to support muscle protein synthesis, the reason muscle atrophy accelerates when vitamin D levels drop, how vitamin D interacts with hormones like testosterone and cortisol, how long it takes to see measurable strength gains after supplementation, the optimal dose, timing, and form of vitamin D for muscle retention, and simple tools to test, optimize, and track your vitamin D levels safely and effectively, whether you're looking to stay strong as you age, optimize athletic performance, or recover faster from stress and injury. This is about reclaiming your biological potential with real science. Let's dive in. 1, vitamin D is a hormone, not just a vitamin, and it directly signals muscle growth. When we talk about vitamin D, most people think of bone health, sunlight, and maybe seasonal depression. But in biological terms, vitamin D behaves far more like a hormone than a traditional vitamin. And this distinction matters, especially when it comes to your muscles. Let's break this down. When you consume vitamin D3, whether through sunlight, food, or supplements, your liver converts it into 25-hydroxy vitamin D, the form most blood tests measure. But that's not the end of the story. That form is then converted by the kidneys and your muscle cells into calcitriol, the active hormonal form. This is where the magic starts. Calcitriol binds to what's called the vitamin D receptor, or VDR, found in various tissues, including your skeletal muscle. Once activated, the receptor moves into the nucleus of your muscle cell and literally turns genes on or off. Genes that control muscle cell growth, differentiation, calcium handling, and protein synthesis. In other words, vitamin D acts like a molecular switch for muscle building. A 2013 review in Molecular Aspects of Medicine highlighted how VDRs are particularly active in type 2 muscle fibers, the fast twitch fibers responsible for explosive strength, sprinting, and metabolic regulation. When VDR activity is low, these fibers shrink faster, become weaker, and regenerate more slowly. So if you've been feeling weaker despite consistent training, or noticing longer recovery times after workouts, a lack of vitamin D might be silently turning off your muscle building machinery. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Your muscle cells don't just respond to vitamin D. They actually help activate it. Research published in Endocrinology shows that skeletal muscle tissue has its own enzyme, CYP27B1, to locally convert vitamin D into its active hormonal form. This means your muscles are not just passive recipients, they're metabolically involved in the vitamin D signaling loop. Think of it like this. If your body were a symphony, vitamin D wouldn't be the sheet music. It would be the conductor, coordinating when and how the instruments, your muscle genes, play. Without it, the performance becomes chaotic, inefficient, or just fades into silence. Now, why does this matter for real life? Because this means you have the ability to influence this hormonal pathway with a single trackable nutrient. You can measure your vitamin D levels through a simple blood test, 25-hydroxyvitamin D. And if you're below the 30 mass/ml mark, which nearly 40% of US adults are, according to NHANES data, you're likely running below your muscular potential. A simple tool to apply is this. Start tracking your sunlight exposure, supplement intake, and ideally, your blood levels of vitamin D at least once per year. The goal for muscular and metabolic health, aim for 40-60 NF/mL, a range supported by the Endocrine Society and many longevity-featured researchers. And remember, the strength of your body isn't just about how hard you train. It's about how well your cells are listening to the signal to adapt, repair, and grow. Vitamin D helps amplify that signal from the inside out. 2, low vitamin D accelerates muscle atrophy. Even if you're training, let's say you're doing all the right things, lifting weights, eating protein, staying active, but somehow your strength gains plateau. You're not recovering as quickly, and your muscle definition, even with consistent training, starts to fade. Here's the frustrating truth. If your vitamin D levels are low, your body may be breaking down muscle faster than it can rebuild it, no matter how disciplined your workouts are. That's not just theory, it's what the data shows. A 2021 study published in Neuroscience analyzed over 400 participants and found that vitamin D deficiency was significantly associated with lower lean muscle mass and poorer physical performance, even in younger adults. What's more telling is that even those who exercised regularly showed suboptimal muscular adaptations if their vitamin D levels were below 30 m/ml. What's happening in your body when this occurs is both chemical and structural. First, low vitamin D leads to reduced expression of insulin-like growth factor 1, IGF-1, a key anabolic hormone that helps stimulate muscle protein synthesis. At the same time, vitamin D deficiency increases myostatin, a protein that inhibits muscle growth. That's like pressing the brake and cutting the fuel line at the same time. Second, chronic vitamin D insufficiency leads to a drop in intramuscular calcium regulation. This matters because calcium is essential for muscle contraction, not just for lifting, but for daily functions like posture, walking, and stabilizing joints. When calcium regulation is off, muscles not only become weaker, they become less coordinated, less responsive. Here's an analogy. Think of your muscles like a construction site. Your training is the crew. Protein is the building material, but vitamin D, it's the permit that allows the crew to operate. Without it, construction slows or stops, even if the materials and workers are ready to go. There's also a deeper cost. Over time, the loss of muscle, known as sarcopenia, doesn't just affect appearance or athleticism. It increases the risk of insulin resistance, falls, joint pain, and even depression, since skeletal muscle plays a role in producing myokines that influence brain health. One particularly compelling finding comes from a double-blind trial in Clinical Nutrition 2020, where researchers gave vitamin D supplements to older women engaged in resistance training. The group that received vitamin D had twice the muscle gain compared to the placebo group over 12 weeks and reported significantly lower levels of fatigue and soreness. The takeaway here is clear. You can't out-train a micronutrient deficiency. Even the best program will hit a ceiling if your cells don't have what they need to respond to the signal. A simple, actionable step. If you're training regularly and not seeing the gains you expect, or you feel like your strength is slowly declining, get your vitamin D levels tested. You can use an at-home finger prick test or ask your doctor for a 25-hydroxy vitamin D panel. If you're below 40 Ni/ml, you may be leaving strength, energy, and resilience on the table. And if this kind of deep dive, science-backed insight is helping you connect the dots in your own health journey, consider subscribing to the channel. There's more coming, and each video is designed to make you stronger, sharper, and more in control of your biology. Let's keep going. 3, vitamin D enhances testosterone and reduces cortisol, 2 hormones that influence muscle preservation. If you want to understand how your body builds or loses muscle, you have to look beyond the muscle itself. You have to look at the hormonal environment those muscles are operating in. And 2 of the biggest players in that environment are testosterone and cortisol. One anabolic, one catabolic. One builds, one breaks down. What's remarkable is that vitamin D directly influences both. Let's start with testosterone. In a 2011 randomized controlled trial published in Hormone and Metabolic Research, healthy men who were vitamin D deficient and then supplemented with 3,300 IU of vitamin D daily for a year experienced a 25% increase in total testosterone levels compared to placebo. Free testosterone, the biologically active form, rose as well. The mechanism? Vitamin D receptors are expressed in the Leydig cells of the testes, the very cells responsible for producing testosterone. When those receptors are activated by sufficient vitamin D, they help optimize testosterone synthesis, supporting everything from strength to energy to motivation. But this isn't just about men. Women also require testosterone, just in smaller amounts, for muscle tone, metabolic health, and libido. And while the boost may be less dramatic in women, studies still show that optimizing vitamin D can improve muscle quality and hormonal balance across both sexes. Now let's look at the other side of the equation, cortisol. Cortisol is your primary stress hormone. It's essential in short bursts, helping you respond to challenges, focus in a crisis, and recover from inflammation. But chronically elevated cortisol from poor sleep, emotional stress, or overtraining can become a muscle-destroying force. And vitamin D, it helps regulate this. Multiple studies, including a 2020 review in Nutrients, show that vitamin D supplementation helps lower baseline cortisol levels, especially in people experiencing stress, fatigue, or overreaching in training. This effect appears to be due to vitamin D's influence on the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal HPA axis, the command center of your stress response. What's happening in your brain when this occurs is fascinating. Vitamin D supports the sensitivity of glucocorticoid receptors, allowing your brain and body to hear cortisol more effectively, so it doesn't need to release as much. This is a classic feedback loop. Better signaling means less overproduction. Less overproduction means less muscle breakdown, better mood, and more recovery bandwidth. Let's bring it all together. If testosterone is the green light for growth and cortisol is the red light that says slow down and conserve, vitamin D is like the traffic controller, synchronizing both lights so your body can push hard, recover well, and adapt efficiently. That's why many high-performance coaches now test vitamin D levels right alongside testosterone, DHEA, and cortisol when evaluating an athlete's readiness and resilience. Here's a simple tool to apply. If you've been under prolonged stress, notice dips in strength or feel flat during training. It's worth exploring both your vitamin D status and your hormonal environment. You can't see hormones with the naked eye, but you can feel them in your drive, your recovery, and your results. And with something as simple, accessible, and evidence-based as vitamin D, you have a real lever to pull. 4, supplementation begins rebuilding muscle fibers in as little as 14 days. When we think about rebuilding muscle, we often imagine months of disciplined training, nutrition, and recovery. And while that's true over the long term, there's a powerful and encouraging insight from the research. Vitamin D supplementation can start reversing muscle atrophy in as little as 14 days. Let me walk you through the data. A 2016 randomized placebo-controlled trial published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition studied older adults with documented vitamin D deficiency. After just 14 days of vitamin D3 supplementation, researchers observed a significant increase in muscle fiber size, particularly the type 2 fast twitch fibers that decline most rapidly with age. Why is that important? Type 2 fibers are responsible for strength, speed, and power, the kind of movement you use to catch yourself if you trip, lift a heavy bag, or sprint across a crosswalk. They also tend to atrophy first as we age, making their preservation a critical part of healthy aging and fall prevention. But here's the kicker. These fibers aren't just for athletes. They're deeply connected to metabolic health, mitochondrial efficiency, and insulin sensitivity. So maintaining fast twitch fiber integrity can reduce risk for type 2 diabetes, improve energy regulation, and even enhance cognitive sharpness. Because healthy muscle mass acts as a metabolic reservoir that supports brain function. So what's happening at the cellular level in those first 2 weeks? Vitamin D activates signaling pathways such as mTOR, mechanistic target of rapamycin, the same anabolic pathway triggered by resistance training and amino acids. It also helps reduce muscle inflammation and oxidative stress by modulating cytokines like IL-6 and TNF-alpha. This creates a more anabolic, less inflammatory environment in which muscle tissue can regenerate and grow. Think of it like priming the soil before planting. Your training and protein are the seeds, but without vitamin D, the soil is depleted. Replenishing that one nutrient turns the environment from resistant to receptive. This doesn't mean you can skip training or rely on supplements alone, but it does show that nutrient signaling is a critical part of the adaptation process, and vitamin D plays a central role. Another study in Calcified Tissue International looked at elderly women undergoing resistance training. The women who took 4,000 IU of vitamin D daily had greater gains in lower body strength and improved balance scores within 4 weeks compared to those who trained without supplement. The researchers concluded that vitamin D was an essential cofactor in muscle responsiveness. So, what's the actionable takeaway? If your levels are low, proper vitamin D supplementation can begin to restore muscle tone, function, and strength in as little as 2 weeks, especially if combined with resistance exercise. And that window is likely even faster if you're younger, more active, or metabolically healthy. A simple protocol to apply is this. If your blood levels are under 30 ng/ml, consider supplementing with 2,000, 4,000 IU of vitamin D3 daily with your doctor's approval. Take it in the morning, ideally with a fat-intaking meal for better absorption. Pair it with movement, even light strength training to help stimulate the muscle repair pathways being turned on. And if you're noticing changes already from these tools or insights, take a moment to like this video. It helps more people find evidence-based content that empowers their physical and mental performance, and it supports the growth of this community we're building together. 5, there's a Goldilocks zone. Too little or too much vitamin D can backfire. At this point, it's clear vitamin D is not just a bone health nutrient. It's a critical player in muscle function, hormone balance, and physical performance. But like any powerful tool, more isn't always better. This brings us to a key concept in physiology known as the dose-response curve, and more specifically, the idea of a Goldilocks zone. Not too little, not too much. Just right. Here's what the research shows. Most studies define sufficient vitamin D status as blood levels between 40 and 60 neurotrauma status /ml of 25 hydroxy vitamin D. Levels below 30 neurotrauma on the scale are typically considered insufficient but once levels rise above 100 ngs/ml, especially over time, we begin to see risks. These include calcium buildup in the blood, hypercalcemia, kidney stress, and arterial stiffness. It's rare, but possible, especially if someone is megadosing without supervision. A large-scale review published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism emphasized that maintaining vitamin D within a narrow optimal window is key. Both too little and too much are associated with decreased muscle function and higher mortality risk. The sweet spot seems to be somewhere between 50, 70 NGN/ml for most people pursuing muscle preservation, immune resilience, and cognitive performance. So how do you find your Goldilocks zone? Step one is to test, not guess. Vitamin D is fat soluble, which means it builds up over time, not like vitamin C or magnesium, which are water soluble and excreted daily. That makes overshooting a real concern if you're supplementing blindly. Home blood test kits for 25-hydroxyvitamin D are now widely available and can give you a snapshot within a few days. Once you know your baseline, you can adjust your intake intelligently. Here's a simple framework. If you're below 30 m/ml, consider 4,000 IU/day for 8-12 weeks, then retest. If you're between 30, 50 m/ml, a maintenance dose of 2,000 IU/day is often sufficient. If you're above 80 ng/mlm, consider pausing supplementation and letting levels normalize. And remember, absorption matters. Vitamin D3, cholecalciferol, is best taken with dietary fat, a small spoonful of olive oil, nut butter, or part of a meal with eggs or avocado can significantly improve uptake. There's also an often overlooked variable, magnesium. This mineral is a cofactor for the enzymes that convert vitamin D into its active form, calciferol. If you're low in magnesium, which nearly half of adults are, your vitamin D may remain biologically inactive even if your blood levels look fine. That's why many functional medicine practitioners recommend combining vitamin D3 with magnesium glycinate or citrate to optimize activation. So ask yourself, are you supplementing based on real data or habit? Are you pairing it with the cofactors your body needs to actually use it? Getting this right creates a silent shift in your physiology. Muscles fire better, mood stabilizes, sleep deepens, and stress resilience improves. And yet it all happens below the surface, driven by one micronutrient in the right range. It's not about chasing extremes. It's about creating an internal environment that supports adaptation, repair, and high performance. 6 daily habits that amplify vitamin D's muscle-preserving effects. Up to this point, we've explored how vitamin D regulates muscle strength, hormonal balance, and cellular repair. But there's something even more exciting. Its effects are amplified when paired with the right daily behaviors. Vitamin D is not a magic pill. It's a signal, and the body listens to that signal most effectively when it's part of a coordinated rhythm of movement, light, sleep, and recovery. Let's look at how to build that rhythm. 1, morning light plus movement. Your body's vitamin D metabolism is strongly influenced by your circadian rhythm. This rhythm governs hormonal pulses, gene expression, and even how well you absorb and activate nutrients. One of the most powerful ways to reinforce this rhythm is by getting natural light within 30-60 minutes of waking, preferably while walking or moving your body. This does 2 things. First, it boosts dopamine and cortisol at appropriate times, which enhances muscle readiness, mental energy, and focus. Second, it sets your internal clock to optimize the timing of hormone release, including growth hormone and testosterone, both essential for muscle preservation. Even 10 minutes outside in the morning helps. And if your skin is exposed, it can trigger the endogenous production of vitamin D3, especially during summer months. 2, resistance training plus load-bearing activity. Vitamin D increases muscle responsiveness to training, but the reverse is also true. Movement, especially under load, stimulates the conversion of inactive vitamin D into its active form, calcitriol. This means your workouts don't just burn calories, they activate the nutrients you're taking in. The sweet spot, 2-4 sessions per week of resistance training, ideally full body or alternating muscle groups. Even body weight movements like squats, push-ups, and lunges are effective when done consistently. Ask yourself, are you using your muscle tissue enough to give your body a reason to preserve it? 3, sleep as muscle protection. It might seem unrelated, but sleep is one of the most important variables in the equation. Sleep deprivation raises cortisol, reduces testosterone, and blunts muscle protein synthesis. Vitamin D helps regulate melatonin production and sleep architecture, especially slow wave sleep, which is where much of the muscle repair and hormonal recalibration occurs. To amplify this effect, take your vitamin D in the morning to support your natural wakefulness cycle. Avoid bright screens at night or use warm tone filters to allow melatonin to rise. Aim for 7.5 to 9 hours of quality sleep and treat it like part of your training regimen. 4, nutrient synergy, magnesium plus omega-3s. We talked earlier about magnesium being a cofactor in vitamin D metabolism. Here's a quick protocol. 300-400 milligrams/day of magnesium glycinate or citrate, ideally at night for a calming effect. Pair it with omega-3 fatty acids, like those from fish oil or flaxseed, which reduce inflammation and support muscle cell membrane repair. This combination creates an internal environment where vitamin D can do its job efficiently without excess inflammation blocking the benefits. 5, strategic sun exposure. If you live in a region with strong UVB during summer months, 10 to 20 minutes of midday sun exposure, arms and legs exposed, no sunscreen initially, a few times per week can generate 10,000 plus IU of vitamin D. But the key is consistency and not burning. Use tools like the D-Minder app or consult your local UV index to time your exposure safely and effectively. So what does this all mean? Vitamin D doesn't work in isolation. It works in context. It works when your light exposure tells your brain it's morning, when your training signals your muscles they're needed, when your sleep allows the repair to take hold. And that's the deeper message here. Your body is listening. Every signal you send, movement, light, nutrients, rest, adds up to a story. Write the one where strength is preserved, not lost, where energy builds, not drains.